The story begins on the streets of Paris, where a man emerges from a manhole in the middle of the night and starts searching for a taxi. He runs towards an empty one, unaware that his movement is attracting the attention of something underground. The taxi driver even tries to help when he is knocked down midway, but gives up upon seeing that something is pulling the man underground. After this, we meet the Americans, Andy, Brad, and Chris, who are in the middle of a trip through Europe. The three are very adventurous and earn points for each radical challenge they complete. When a French woman walks by, Chris dares Andy to get her phone number, but he replies that the girl is not his type. The other two burst into laughter and comment that he hasn't flirted with anyone so far. Trying to change the subject, Andy says he will show them a challenge so bold that the two will be envious. In Paris, they go straight to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and Andy begins to make several calculations in a little notebook. When he pulls a long rope out of his bag, his friends start to worry, and Brad even apologizes for the jokes on the train, saying that Andy doesn't need to prove anything to them. Then, they hear someone approaching the restricted area and quickly hide. Who appears is a beautiful young woman, who tucks a note into her cleavage and tears up, preparing to jump. Andy comes out of hiding to change her mind, but the young woman goes ahead, and he jumps after her, trusting the rope that he had already tied around his leg. His friends scramble to hold the other end while he grabs the girl's foot. He ends up with only her shoe, but they are already so close to the ground that she is not hurt. In return, Andy hits his head on a beam during the ascent back up and wakes up in the hospital the next day. Brad has kept the mysterious girl's shoe, and Andy asks his friends for help finding the note and discovering who she is. This causes several misunderstandings with the French, who are outraged by the tourists' behavior, except for one lady who confuses them with beggars and tosses a coin. In the hospital, Andy can't believe his eyes when he sees the girl passing in the hallway, dressed in a nurse's uniform. He runs after her and even manages to get a smile when he says he wants to return her shoe. But it's then that an unwitting doctor opens a door with a bang and knocks the already injured young man down. While the girl runs away again, the doctor also asks about her, saying that she stole his heart. Without understanding that he is talking literally about the organ, Andy says that he knows the feeling. Then his friends arrive, bringing good news. They found the note and discovered that the girl's name is Seraphine Pigot. As soon as Andy recovers, he musters the courage to go to her house and ring the bell. She still has her nurse disguise on when she answers, and he notices her fingers stained with blood. She takes the shoe back, thanks him quickly, and slams the door, telling him that they shouldn't linger around. Chris and Brad are already leaving, but Andy fears that she might be trying to harm herself again and starts ringing the bell like a madman. Seraphine opens the door, begging him to go away, and agrees to set a date for the next day. At the agreed time, she arrives on a bicycle while the guys are still fixing their looks and giving last tips for the conquest. The two go to a cafe, and everything begins to go wrong because Andy is very clumsy, and Seraphine suspects that he has too high expectations for this date. When her patience runs out, he opens up and confesses that he is so nervous because he likes her a lot. He also says that he fears for her safety and can't stop thinking about her sad eyes that night. This seems to touch the girl, and she admits that she was very moved by his heroism, jumping to save her without thinking twice. However, she returns to speaking in a mysterious tone, saying that no one can really help her. It is then that another customer in the cafe begins to pick on Andy, and bulks up against his friends too, who are poorly hidden at another table. Seraphine tells the bully to stop, but he headbutts Andy, and she finds herself forced to return the favor, saving the guy from a beating. She pushes the man with a force no one expected, and he goes crashing to the other side of the hall. Realizing that she revealed more than she wanted, Seraphine gets nervous and runs out of the cafe, but Andy follows her, very impressed with her feat. The two almost kiss, but she thinks better of it and tells him to stop looking for her, assuring him that it's for his own good. Andy feels heartbroken, but his friends say that this is just a game to make him more interested. He is not so sure and remains worried about her mental health, as Seraphine also revealed that she is an orphan and seemed to blame herself for her parents' deaths. Then the three decide to pay another visit to her house, and this time the door is opened by a man named Claude. He says that Seraphine is not home, but claims that he loves Americans and invites the trio to come in. Andy declines the invitation and asks about Claude's relationship with the girl, to which he merely replies that he looks after her. He also hands them a flyer for a party at the Club de la Lune, saying that Seraphine will attend. Andy can't resist temptation and drags his friends to the nightclub a little later. The bouncer seems to let any shabby person in, but blocks their entrance upon noticing they are Americans and only allows them to enter when Andy says they were invited by Claude. Inside, the atmosphere is very strange, and there are hardly any women, much less Seraphine. Chris volunteers to check her house again so that Andy can wait there with Brad. No one answers when he knocks, but a light coming from another part of the house catches his attention. Chris decides to investigate, and to his shock, he sees that Seraphine is locked in a cage and immediately breaks the window to enter the basement and save her. Even locked up, she keeps saying that she doesn't need help and tries to kick Chris out, until he mentions that Andy is at the party. Upon seeing the flyer that Claude gave him, Seraphine changes her mind and asks Chris to bring her the cage key, which is hanging on the wall. She says that Andy is in great danger, and for that reason, Chris refuses to obey when she tells him to stay out of it. Realizing that she won't convince him politely, Seraphine prefers to knock him out with a punch so that he doesn't interfere. Minutes later, he wakes up locked in the cage and sees that the key is back on the wall, well out of his reach. The basement is empty except for a hidden area behind a curtain, from which sounds of medical equipment come. Chris starts screaming, asking for someone to help him get out of there, but no one responds. When Seraphine arrives at the club, the bouncer seems to be a little scared of her, thus letting her in even without Claude's permission. Inside, she grabs Andy and warns him that they need to leave there as soon as possible. A man named Jack tries to block the way for the two, and Seraphine says that Andy is hers, leading the boy through a tunnel gallery. Claude reprimands Jack for the slip-up and then follows the couple, unaware that Brad is coming right behind him. In the cage, Chris puts his skills into practice and transforms his clothes into an improvised treadmill, knocking the key onto it with his shoe. While he starts to pull, Seraphine and Andy continue fleeing from Claude until they reach a wall that has a sinister hole, where Andy must go in alone. As a farewell, he takes the opportunity to steal a kiss, feeling her nails on his back and noting that they look more like claws. Growing increasingly frantic, she pushes him through the hole and yells at him, telling him to disappear. Andy still thinks that Claude is the greatest danger, so he hesitates to leave her behind, even when her voice begins to change. He only changes his mind when Seraphine loses her patience and starts throwing bricks at him. On the dance floor, Claude's friends also seem to be undergoing a change that makes them more animalistic. It is only when the light of the full moon hits Seraphine's face that we discover the truth. She and her companions are all werewolves. After the transformation, she enters through the same hole, and Brad doesn't see her when he arrives right after, still searching for Andy. Meanwhile, the other werewolves spread terror through the club full of victims who fell into the trap, just as the three Americans did. They rush to the exit, but the security guard has already locked it from the outside and even removed the fake sign. Now free, Chris hears anguished moans coming from the other side of the basement and goes to check if anyone needs help. Opening the curtain, he sees a terrifying werewolf without legs lying on a stretcher, who still tries to pursue him. The creature is so strong that it manages to drag the bed and all the hospital equipment with it, advancing towards Chris. The boy uses a spoon to unlock the nearest door and is met with a cupboard. However, now the monster is so close that Chris manages to jump over the overturned bed and escape through the window. Brad also has a dreadful encounter in the tunnels, where a pair of glowing points makes him curious, and he only discovers that it is a werewolf when it is too late. Brad does not survive the attack, and his body is carried away by the current. Still in the tunnels, Andy also panics when he comes face to face with the beast and runs in the opposite direction, reaching a gate in time to close it. However, the beast is so powerful that it easily knocks down the entire grate, and Andy can only buy time by using a loose bar as a weapon. Even so, the beast recovers quickly and bites his leg during the escape. The next morning, he wakes up in Seraphine's house with very heightened senses. Chris is also there, hiding in the yard and peering through the window while Seraphine is blending some organs, apparently human, in a blender. Throwing pebbles at the window, he attracts Andy's attention and begins to alert his friend, but Seraphine interrupts them by entering the room with the drink. She explains to Andy that he was bitten by a werewolf, and because of that, he will become one too. Laughing, he thinks it's all a joke until he begins to suffer terrible hallucinations, and Seraphine explains that this is normal during the transition. Things only get worse when her mother appears, and he discovers that she is a corpse. Terrified, he flees through the window, not noticing the improvement in his physical skills. He also does not hear his friend calling. and Chris is captured by Claude. Then Andy returns to the site of the club, which is now swarming with police, as well as various parts of each victim. He is horrified to recognize Brad when they pull his body from the river, and it is then that he meets Inspector Leduc. At the police station, he discovers that all the bodies are without their hearts, but no one believes his testimony. Besides the mystery, Andy has to deal with the changes happening in his body and with his appetite. This includes the hunger for female company, an instinct that awakens when he meets Amy Finch. She is also an American tourist and agrees to go out to dinner with him, but finds his manners at the table strange. Andy remains in denial even when Brad's ghost surprises him, and his reaction causes the biggest embarrassment. Not noticing a detective who won't leave his tail, Andy runs to the bathroom and talks to the deceased. Brad repeats Seraphine's explanations and also says that he himself is now a zombie, doomed to wander the earth until the werewolf that killed him also perishes. However, the most important thing at the moment is for Andy to ditch this girl and lock himself up before the moon appears in the sky. Stubbornly ignoring all of this, Andy takes Amy for a stroll in the cemetery where the atmosphere between them begins to heat up. The detective remains on his tail, sneaking behind the tombstones with his little dog. Then Andy gets startled when he begins to feel the effects of the moon and leaves the girl atop a tomb, running to throw himself into a fountain and cool off his body. Offended, she begins searching for him, and it is then that Andy emerges from the water in werewolf form, ready to attack her. Amy runs through the cemetery and tries to throw him off with perfume, hiding in a closed mausoleum. However, she confuses it with the shadow of the little dog and ends up leaving her hiding spot at the wrong time. After attacking her, Andy also devours the detective, and not even his little dog escapes. Waking up amid this chaos with the flashes of journalists, Andy is arrested by Inspector Leduc. He reveals that he hired the detective to follow him and shows the boy how the victims from yesterday turned out. When Andy is left alone in the morgue, Amy opens her eyes and starts cursing him. Soon Brad appears too, and the two argue while the delegate ridicules Leduc's insane theories. She orders that the American be arrested immediately, but Andy has already escaped when the inspector returns. He is with Brad and Amy on the street, finally convincing himself that it is all true. Brad says that the only way to become human again is to eat the heart of the werewolf that transformed him, and Andy knows that it was probably Seraphine. Just then, Claude's gang appears out of nowhere and drags Andy to an old church by force. Descending into the catacombs, Claude explains that his clan is made up of werewolves, hand-picked to form a superior race. Andy's transformation was an accident, but he can still join this powerful group if he proves his worth. He takes him to the cell where Chris is trapped and asks him to rip out his friend's heart. When Andy refuses, Claude warns that this will cost him his own heart, but he remains steadfast in his decision. He suddenly attacks Claude, trusting in his new reflexes to escape. However, they are all werewolves too, and Andy soon finds himself cornered until Seraphine's voice calls his name. She breaks down the door right behind him, and the two flee through there, with Seraphine pouring gasoline all along the way. Reaching a secret passage, she throws a torch on the ground and ignites the entire tunnel before jumping into the water with Andy. This path leads directly to the basement of her house, where Seraphine shows who is lying behind the curtain. His name is Thierry, and he is a scientist and also her stepfather. Not long ago, he was about to discover a cure for the family's condition, but the first test went wrong, and she turned into a wolf. Seraphine attacked her own mother and then went after Thierry, who couldn't escape through the sewer. Upon waking, she felt so guilty that she climbed to the top of the tower to throw herself off, and that's how she met Andy. It doesn't take long for the wolf gang to come check if the fugitives are there. Andy flees upstairs while Seraphine tries to delay Claude, but the others soon trail after her. To make matters worse, Amy reappears, still very upset, and therefore tries to help the werewolves in the hunt, showing where Andy is hiding. Fortunately, she can't even whistle with her body falling apart, and the gang only sees Andy after he manages to steal a car. However, he crashes shortly afterward, and even causes a domino effect, enraging several drivers. Now pursued by two different groups, Andy hitches a ride on the back of a bus to return to the basement. There, he finds Seraphine devastated, trying in vain to revive her stepfather after the gang destroyed the lab. To make matters worse, they also stole the substance that causes instant metamorphosis, leaving only a pamphlet for the next party. Knowing it is another trap, Andy infiltrates among the guests and turns off the music, warning everyone that they are in danger. However, Leduc is also at the party, and Andy is arrested again, amidst the applause of the audience, who does not believe his warnings. Seraphine is outside and sees that the bouncer is already blocking the exit. The police discover that they are locked in just as the macabre show begins. Claude and his friends go up on stage dressed as monks and reveal a cross where Chris is tied up. In light of this, Andy grabs a police officer's gun and shoots at the gangsters, but is soon restrained, and Leduc orders everyone arrested, while the false monks inject themselves with the substance. Not even the handcuffs are enough to contain the beasts when they finally reveal themselves and begin attacking everyone indiscriminately. The base of the cross ends up giving way, and Chris goes down amidst the chaos, while Seraphine frees herself from the bouncer and knocks down the door with a bulldozer. Responding to a call for reinforcements, several patrol cars arrive at the same time, along with the delegate herself. The scene is bizarre, as the place is an abandoned church, and Chris emerges still tied to the cross, running for his life as best he can. The delegate gets irritated with the police's superstitions and orders everyone to go in now. Andy gets another gun and shoots one of the werewolves, alerting Seraphine that Claude has managed to escape. Several others have been taken down, and one of them is Brad's killer, who finally frees himself from the physical trap. Running from the police, Andy and Seraphine descend into the catacombs and take different paths. Leduc runs into a werewolf and flees in fear, falling through the secret passage. The delegate doesn't have the same luck and is devoured along with her aide. Their screams alert Seraphine, and she goes to eliminate one of the werewolves, discovering that she is out of ammunition at the worst possible moment. With no chance to defeat him in her human form, she bolts just as she encounters a fallen monk who still has a syringe. Seraphine decides to use it and transforms too, facing the fellow werewolf now on equal ground. However, Andy doesn't know this when he arrives armed and shoots at the two. The other dies right away, but Seraphine returns to being human, and Andy is horrified to see what he has done. Saying that there are no more chances, she asks him to at least shorten her pain and reminds him that she will be free if he eats her heart. The police arrive at this moment, and Andy lets them take care of her, as now only Claude remains for the gang to be eliminated. While searching for the enemy, he slips and falls onto the subway tracks just as a train appears around the bend. Seeing that Claude is also coming his way, Andy jumps just as they are about to reach him, and then the train hits the werewolf. The passengers are startled by the collision, and the conductor goes to peek at the tracks through the glass, only to be immediately attacked. The beast invades the next car, and everyone panics upon seeing that thing, but soon the drug wears off. Claude wakes up in his human form and begins preparing another syringe when Andy arrives through the window and knocks the injection down with a flying kick. The two fight, and Andy sees on Claude's shoulder the mark he himself left on the night he was bitten, and discovers that it wasn't Seraphine's fault. Trying to retrieve the syringe, Claude ends up stabbing his rival and tries to run upon realizing the size of the mistake he made, but cannot escape. Andy transforms and knocks him down to the ground, devouring his heart from behind. Months later, he and Seraphine are about to get married when Chris knocks the ring over and the two leap to recover it. We then see that they are at the Statue of Liberty, and Andy slips the ring onto Seraphine's finger while they are still in the air.